Welcome to a captivating journey through one of the quirkiest and most iconic college comedies of all time. Revenge of the Nerds celebrates the spirit of anyone who's ever felt rejected or underestimated and dared to fight back anyway. Today, we're unboxing every major event behind this legendary film, from its original script ideas and on-set troubles to the missing subplots that nearly transformed it into a drastically different story. If you think you know all there is about Revenge of the Nerds, prepare to be pleasantly surprised. 1. The story of the Scorned, an introduction to Revenge of the Nerds. At its core, Revenge of the Nerds revolves around a group of college outsiders who refuse to let persistent mockery define them. The film kicks off at Adams College, a place where fraternity status and athletic achievements seem to determine everyone's social worth. Dominating this power structure is the Alpha-Beta fraternity, a band of jocks notorious for their arrogant behavior and relentless bullying. Into this hostile environment step Lewis and Gilbert, two bright but socially awkward freshmen longing for a true college experience. From day one, they, and others labeled as nerds, become the easy targets of vicious pranks and petty humiliation. Far from backing down, these so-called misfits form their own coalition, initially out of desperation, but soon discovering an unexpected camaraderie. The movie's blend of slapstick humor, irreverent jokes, and heartfelt underdog spirit turned it into a surprising box office hit and a cornerstone of 80s pop culture. This comedic showdown pits brawn against brains. The swaggering alpha-betas try to maintain their campus dominance at all costs, while our endearing nerds fight for a sense of dignity. Along the way, the film spotlights iconic characters like Lewis, Gilbert, Lamar, Poindexter, Booger, and Wormser. Their camaraderie, combined with a famously dorky group laugh, helped redefine what it meant to be a nerd in mainstream entertainment. Decades later, their victory is still celebrated by anyone who's felt on the outside looking in. 2. The lost version you've never seen. Though most audiences know the finished product, Revenge of the Nerds might have looked drastically different. Early drafts contained a sprawling Las Vegas subplot where the main nerds were meant to leave campus for a raucous trip to persuade the National Lambda 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 fraternity to accept them officially. The plan involved a wild chain of events, everything from hacking law enforcement databases to dealing with Gilbert's morally questionable uncle. In these lost scenes, Gilbert's uncle Mayer was a wealthy banker who'd financed Gilbert's tuition. Far from supportive, Mayer held bigoted views and tried to pressure Gilbert into distancing himself from the Tri-Lam leadership, many of whom were black. This conflict reached its boiling point when Gilbert, in a fit of moral outrage, tore up the trust fund papers that tied him to his uncle's money. Through this act, Gilbert chose loyalty to his friends and to a more inclusive vision of fraternity life. While these scenes would have added layers of racial tension and broader societal commentary, the filmmakers ultimately decided to trim them to keep the focus on campus antics. Nevertheless, hints of this abandoned storyline linger in small, unexplained details, like Booger's Elvis-themed outfit, which originally tied back to the Elvis suite in Vegas. Had the Las Vegas subplot survived, Revenge of the Nerds might have tackled themes well beyond the campus quad. 3. The script's origins and its various creators. Officially credited to Steve Zacharias and Jeff Buhai, the Revenge of the Nerds screenplay also drew from the ideas of Miguel Tejada Flores and Tim Metcalf. According to an article in GQ, Tejada Flores was inspired by his father's experience at Caltech, a place renowned for genius-level hijinks. Tim Metcalf brought his own insights, adding comedic layers to the concept of a prank-filled tech school environment. In parallel, Zacharias and Buhai incorporated real-life anecdotes, like a friend in college who, after being rejected by every fraternity, simply started his own. The title itself has a murky origin. One story claims that producer Ted Field casually coined Revenge of the Nerds out of thin air. Another suggests it was borrowed from an existing magazine article. Zacharias and Buhai have joked that they didn't even know how to spell nerds correctly when they first wrote it. Despite the confusion, the film's central premise remained crystal clear. Take a bunch of overlooked, socially awkward students and show them flipping the status quo. Eventually, the script landed at 20th Century Fox, and while the studio recognized its potential, the project was no sure bet. With a modest budget, some say $6 million, others claim $8, the film was, by Hollywood standards, a relatively small risk. Yet it proved to have a cultural impact far exceeding its financial outlay, paving the way for multiple sequels and a lasting legacy in teen comedy lore. Picking a director and those initial proposals. Jeff Canoe, who would ultimately direct Revenge of the Nerds, was handed several comedy scripts by 20th Century Fox, each vying for his attention. Among the contenders were Bachelor Party, later known as Tom Hanks's breakout Bachelor Hijinks movie, and Give Me an F, a cheerleading-focused comedy. Canoe weighed his options carefully, recognizing that the teen college comedy genre was already crowded with films like Porky's and National Lampoon's Animal House. What set Revenge of the Nerds apart was its underdog angle. The script didn't just rely on lewd jokes. It explored marginalized students using their brains to combat social injustice. This layer of empathy, wrapped in irreverent humor, caught Canoe's eye. He agreed to helm the project, understanding it had a chance to stand out by championing the uncool kids. Next came the choice of filming location. The production scouted several universities, finally deciding on the University of Arizona in Tucson. The campus's wide lawns, sunlit buildings, and southwestern vibe felt perfect for the film's comedic showdowns. Yet gaining approval from university officials proved tricky. Once they discovered the script's edgy pranks and sometimes bawdy humor, administrators hesitated to let the crew in. Canoe and the team had to walk a fine line, convincing the school board that Revenge of the Nerds wouldn't stain the university's reputation permanently. 5. Challenges. Filming at the University of Arizona. Initially, the University of Arizona was open to the idea of a Hollywood production showcasing its picturesque campus. Enthusiasm quickly dimmed, however, when school officials delved deeper into the screenplay's racy antics. Worried about potential blowback from taxpayers, parents, and donors, the university administration nearly pulled the plug on filming privileges. Only after multiple rounds of negotiation and strict assurances that nothing too shocking would occur on camera did they allow filming to proceed. Even then, tensions ran high. Rumor has it an off-duty police officer, hired as extra security, discovered a stash of cocaine in one of the on-site changing rooms. The 80s were known for a more laissez-faire attitude toward certain substances, and according to the story, the officer chose not to press charges. Still, the mere existence of such an incident rattled administrators, increasing scrutiny of the film crew's every move. Despite these bumps, the cast managed to bond during production. James Cromwell, who played Lewis's father, famously devised the nerd laugh, a distinctive, high-pitched chortle that became a recurring gag among the cast. This creative spark helped lighten the mood and remind everyone why they were there, to deliver an unforgettable comedy about misfits finding their moment to shine. By the time filming wrapped, the University of Arizona had unwittingly become part of a cult classic's lore, for better or worse. 6. Deleted scenes, the Las Vegas trip, and a racist uncle. In early drafts, the Nerds took a road trip to Las Vegas for a Tri-Lam conference. Far from a mere sightseeing excursion, this subplot showcased the group's attempt to earn official acceptance into Lambda. Lambda, Lambda, They booked a luxurious Elvis suite, a setting ripe for comedic chaos. Booger would ogle the glitzy decor, Wormser would hack casino systems, and the entire group would cluelessly offend Tri-Lam elders by wearing culturally insensitive attire. The heart of this storyline centered on Gilbert's uncle Mayer, a financier whose deep-seated racism stunned the nerds. In a pivotal confrontation, Mayer insulted the Tri-Lam delegates, many of whom were black, exposing his xenophobic mindset. Gilbert, horrified by his uncle's bigotry, finally tore up his trust fund documents, severing his financial safety net to stand by his friends. This defining act proved how far the nerds had come. They weren't just challenging campus bullies, they were battling prejudice on all fronts. The comedic interplay of hacking pranks and awkward culture clashes might have added depth to the story, further highlighting the film's commentary on prejudice. Yet the final cut axed these scenes, presumably to maintain a leaner, campus-focused narrative. While only traces remain, Booger's Elvis costume, for instance, fans have long speculated how these scrapped elements could have reframed Revenge of the Nerds as more than just an outlandish college comedy. 7. Subplot about Stan's nerdy brother. Stan Gable, the poster child of Alpha Beta, exudes swagger and athletic dominance. He leads the bullying campaigns against Lewis, Gilbert, and the rest of their outsider friends. Yet a hidden angle in the original script painted Stan in a more complicated light. A brief phone call in one deleted scene had Stan answering a call from his older brother, a bona fide nerd demanding repayment of a lingering debt. Furious and embarrassed, Stan tried to hush up the conversation, revealing a side of him that viewers never got to see in theaters. This subplot suggested that Stan's hatred toward nerds could stem from his own familial ties to the very community he publicly ridiculed. Perhaps he was desperate to hide this connection from his fellow Alpha Betas, fearing they'd reject him if they knew the truth. Alternatively, his animosity might be rooted in an unresolved family feud, Stan wanting to project a hyper-masculine image to distance himself from his brother's studious demeanor. Cutting the scene kept the film's pace quick and comedic, but it also removed a nuance that might have made Stan less one-dimensional. It hinted at how bullying can sometimes spring from personal insecurities rather than pure malice. The final version of Revenge of the Nerds framed Stan as a straightforward antagonist, leaving his complex backstory on the cutting room floor. 8. Other cut scenes. Races, vandalism, and dark moments. Beyond the Las Vegas saga, Revenge of the Nerds had even more extracurricular footage that never made the final cut. One sequence reportedly involved a chariot race during the homecoming Greek games. The Tri-Lams teamed up with the Omega Mu sorority, building offbeat chariots and using their collective brainpower to outmaneuver Alpha Beta's brute force. This victory led directly to the next cutscene, the Alpha Betas, seething over their loss, ransacking the nerds' new house in an after-dark rampage. This vandalism revealed Alpha Beta's deeper cruelty, depicting them as not just bullies, but destructive sore losers. The scene took on a darker edge than most comedic moments in the film, illustrating how far the jocks would go to maintain social dominance. According to some who saw early previews, it sharpened the emotional stakes, making the nerds' ultimate triumph feel more deserved and cathartic. A few fans also recall a funky montage of the nerds discovering a rundown property destined to become their chapter house. Set to an upbeat soundtrack, it featured Lewis, Gilbert, and company brainstorming how to transform the decrepit space into a haven of geek culture, complete with a corner for Lamar's dance routines and a practice area for Poindexter's violin. While these clips have achieved near-mythic status among devoted fans, they were conspicuously absent from most home video releases. 9. The complete version versus the lost footage. The disparity between the script's ambitions and the final cut raises the question, what would Revenge of the Nerds have looked like if all these subplots had stayed in? On one hand, we would have seen a more complex film tackling family conflicts, racism, and the intricacies of Greek life rituals. Themes of discrimination, beyond simple jock versus nerd hostility, might have given the story a weightier tone. Uncle Mayer's vitriolic racism, for instance, could have offered a glimpse into broader societal prejudices. Yet the film's charm arguably lies in its brisk pacing and singular focus on the ragtag nerds toppling campus bullies. Lengthy family showdowns or convoluted subplots may have diluted the comedic thrust that made the movie an instant crowd pleaser. The 1980s were a golden age for college comedies, many of which thrived on quick laughs and unrelenting energy. Ultimately, the creative team opted to deliver a concise narrative that hammered home the underdog arc. The lost material, though fascinating, threatened to slow the film's tempo, reducing the comedic sparks that kept audiences enthralled. While fans lament the disappearance of these additional layers, they also acknowledge that the theatrical cut's streamlined approach might be what cemented the movie's cult status. In other words, trimming out the extra content could have been a necessary sacrifice to preserve the comedic heart of Revenge of the Nerds. 10. Today's controversy. Were the nerds always in the right? Decades after its release, Revenge of the Nerds faces renewed scrutiny over certain plot points that now spark ethical debate. While the film champions the idea of marginalized students standing up for themselves, it also includes scenes some critics find questionable in terms of consent and privacy. Modern audiences have pointed out that a few gags, from secret videotaping to identity-based jokes, fall short of today's ethical standards. Disney Plus, for instance, has selectively hosted some sequels but left out the original film. This omission reflects the new sensitivity studios and platforms have toward content containing outdated social norms. The discussion raises a broader question. Should we judge older comedies by contemporary values or view them as cultural artifacts from a time when comedic boundaries were more lenient? Supporters argue that banning or heavily censoring Revenge of the Nerds sets a dangerous precedent, potentially eliminating many classic films that also incorporate questionable material. After all, numerous 80s teen flicks, whether raunchy comedies or horror slashers, employed tropes no longer deemed acceptable. On the other hand, viewers who feel uncomfortable about certain scenes argue that acknowledging these missteps is crucial. Ultimately, the film's comedic premise remains both entertaining and potentially problematic, demonstrating how humor evolves alongside societal norms. 11. A surprise composer, the king of film scores. One of the most intriguing behind-the-scenes facts about Revenge of the Nerds is its musical pedigree. Thomas Newman, yes, the Thomas Newman who would later compose unforgettable scores for The Shawshank Redemption, American Beauty, and Finding Nemo, contributed to this seemingly humble college comedy. Newman belongs to a storied family of Hollywood composers. His father was Alfred Newman, and his cousin is singer-songwriter Randy Newman. In the 1980s, Thomas Newman was still in the early stages of his career, taking on projects that offered him a chance to hone his craft. Revenge of the Nerds let him experiment with whimsical cues and playful melodies that underscored the film's light-hearted rebellion. While it lacks the haunting subtlety of his later work, the score hints at the deft emotional layering that would become Newman's signature trait. This project underscores how many of Hollywood's top talents began with smaller, sometimes overlooked gigs. Composers, directors, and actors alike often cut their teeth on these less prestigious assignments, gleaning valuable lessons that carry forward into major productions. In Newman's case, his experience on a rowdy, nerd-centric comedy contributed to the dynamic range he's now famous for. So the next time you watch Revenge of the Nerds, pay attention to the background music. It's a window into the early genius of a future Hollywood powerhouse. 12. A flood of sequels, and even a TV movie. Such was the original film's popularity that it spawned a cluster of follow-ups. 3 official sequels hit screens in 1987, 1992, and 1994, expanding the Nerds' adventures in new but often derivative directions. Revenge of the Nerds. 2. Nerds in Paradise found the team in Fort Lauderdale juggling poolside parties and corporate frat politics. While it lacked the original's fresh underdog spark, it still retained the playful essence that fans loved. A lesser-known installment is the 1991 TV movie Revenge of the Nerds 3, The Next Generation, which explored a new wave of nerds contending with entrenched jock culture at Adams College. Then came Revenge of the Nerds 4, Nerds in Love, which tackled wedding day chaos and the comedic hurdles of nerdy romance. These later outings had uneven receptions, with some viewers embracing them as guilty pleasures and others pining for the simple charm of the first film. In the late 2000s, rumors circulated about a possible remake, either as a film or TV series. For a time, fans wondered if modern social dynamics, marked by online gamer communities and geek-chic culture, would mesh well with the franchise's rebellious humor. Ultimately, the project fizzled, underscoring that recapturing the original's appeal is trickier than it seems. The Nerds brand, however, remains a cultural touchstone for comedic underdog stories everywhere. 13. John Goodman's early role as a no-nonsense coach. By the mid-1980s, John Goodman was still a rising actor eager for roles that showcased his presence, and Revenge of the Nerds offered exactly that. Though his character, Coach Harris, doesn't command center stage, he imbues the film's jock side with an extra layer of intimidation. Sporting a booming voice and a physically imposing frame, Goodman personifies the alpha-beta culture of chest-thumping dominance. At the time, few could have predicted that this intense coach would go on to become one of Hollywood's most versatile and beloved figures. Just a few years later, Goodman gained widespread recognition playing Dan Connor on Roseanne, displaying a knack for both comedy and heartfelt drama. He further solidified his reputation with iconic roles in films like The Big Lebowski and Pixar's Monsters, Inc., showcasing an impressive range that spanned from comedic mania to genuine warmth. Looking back, it's fascinating to see how Goodman's cameo in Revenge of the Nerds foreshadowed the charismatic persona that would define his career. Even in a secondary role, he dominated every scene he appeared in, capturing the spirit of a win-at-all-costs coach who expected total obedience from his players. It's a testament to both Goodman's talent and the film's ability to attract rising stars that Revenge of the Nerds helped launch so many now familiar names. 14. Anthony Edwards. From nerd to pilot to doctor. Anthony Edwards's portrayal of Gilbert in Revenge of the Nerds gave the movie much of its empathy and sincerity. Mild-mannered, soft-spoken, and innately kind, Gilbert stood in contrast to the more outlandish personalities of Booger, Lamar, and even Lewis. Yet, only 2 years after the film's release, Edwards appeared as Goose in Top Gun, becoming Tom Cruise's easygoing co-pilot in a high-octane action flick. If that wasn't enough, Edwards later cemented his star status by playing Dr. Mark Green on the medical drama ER. The role won him a Golden Globe and turned him into a household name throughout the 1990s. In essence, Revenge of the Nerds provided Edwards a springboard to display his versatility. His earnest performance made Gilbert relatable to viewers who felt overshadowed or disregarded in their own social spheres. It proved he could handle both comedic and heartfelt dramatic parts with ease. His subsequent success also exemplifies how the film, often dismissed as a bawdy teen comedy, could be a launchpad for serious talent. Edwards's transition from an underdog role to action co-star and eventually to respected TV drama lead highlights the unpredictable arcs of Hollywood careers. Through it all, fans still fondly recall Gilbert's unassuming grin and steadfast loyalty to his fellow nerds at Adams College. 15. The audience reaction, surprisingly tame at first. Upon its 1984 release, Revenge of the Nerds slotted neatly into the thriving teen comedy genre. Critics were divided, but many recognized a refreshing spin on the typical crude campus romp. Audiences, intrigued by the idea of brainy outcasts turning the tables on arrogant jocks, flocked to see the film. While the jokes were sometimes raunchy, the underlying message of empowerment resonated strongly, making it a mild surprise hit at the box office. Interestingly, the controversies that swirl around the movie today were less pronounced in 1984. Pop culture had a different set of boundaries. Pranks that would now trigger criticism often passed as standard comedic fare back then. While some reviewers noted the film's more questionable stunts, the general public seemed to celebrate the underdog story without dwelling too heavily on moral oversights. In subsequent years, cultural norms shifted, prompting viewers to reevaluate certain scenes through a more critical lens. Yet at the time, Revenge of the Nerds was lauded as a feel-good crowd-pleaser, an antidote to hyper-masculine jock culture that dominated both real-life universities and many other teen comedies. This explains why it remained popular enough to earn sequels, spin-offs, and consistent airings on cable channels, proving that, for better or worse, its comedic formula worked well for an 80s audience. 16. Donald GIBB, OGRE, a brawny villain turned craft beer artist. Among the cast of antagonists, Donald GIBB's towering presence as OGRE stands out. OGRE, a hot-headed alpha-beta member, has a simple vocabulary, mostly the word nerds, shouted at peak volume. Though not the ringleader like Stan, he embodies brute force and a tendency to solve problems with his fists. Audiences couldn't help but both fear and laugh at his bombastic taunts. Post-Revenge of the Nerds, GIBB discovered an unexpected niche. He became a sort of mascot for a craft beer brand out in California. Companies recognized that his imposing image and comedic persona had a nostalgic appeal. GIBB featured in ads and appearances where he leaned into the ogre shtick, bellowing phrases reminiscent of his role in the film. His business ventures in the beverage world gave him a second act as a lovable figure known for entertaining fans of both craft beer and 80s nostalgia. Although Ogre didn't boast the complexity of some other characters, he remains memorable for his raw comedic impact. Few can forget his exaggerated grimaces and explosive frustration whenever the nerds gained an upper hand. In many ways, GIBB's career arc exemplifies how even a minor or side antagonist can resonate with an audience, opening unexpected doors decades after the movie's original release. 17. Oscar nominations and future stars, the orphans who made it big. One of the most remarkable aspects of Revenge of the Nerds is how many of its alumni went on to achieve critical acclaim. James Cromwell, playing Lewis's father, might have seemed like a minor addition, but he later earned an Oscar nomination for his role in Babe, 1995. Anthony Edwards, as we've seen, became a Golden Globe winner for ER. Thomas Newman, whose early score contributed to the film's zany atmosphere, notched multiple Academy Award nominations for his evocative compositions in major cinematic hits. The movie's production team members, who might have once been dismissed for working on a frivolous teen comedy, also found long-term success in Hollywood. Together, they demonstrate that comedic projects labeled as lightweight can serve as stepping stones for future industry heavyweights. This phenomenon is so common in film history that fans sometimes refer to such early projects as Oscar orphan films, where lesser-known roles precede stellar awards recognition. Reflecting on Revenge of the Nerds, it's striking how a seemingly small-scale film with a modest budget turned into a nexus for emerging talent. It fueled the careers of actors, composers, and even behind-the-scenes creatives who would leave significant marks on Hollywood. Their journeys remind us that big successes can spring from the most unassuming origins and that comedic flair can coexist with future dramatic gravitas. So ends our comprehensive look at the 17 key events behind Revenge of the Nerds. From hidden Vegas adventures and deleted family feuds to a surprisingly prestigious creative team, this cult classic holds more surprises than you might expect. Which part intrigued you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into movie history. Thank you for watching, and remember, never underestimate the power of a proud nerd. See you next time.